Your numbers don't match our records, Clive said, voice even like this was routine. That's when I realized I wasn't in a meeting. I was at a sentencing. My name is Julian Reyes. I'm 35 years old. I've worked in enterprise data systems for over a decade. Until recently, I was a senior data solutions architect at a B2B consulting firm based in Chicago. My job was to design and maintain ERP and CRM performance systems for our clients, which means I didn't just report numbers. I built the systems that calculated them. I understood every trigger, every transformation, every scheduled job running behind the scenes. 6 years at that company, and on a quiet Thursday morning they tried to erase me. This is the story of how I turned the system they abused into the thing that exposed them. If you've ever felt like your work was buried or your voice ignored, subscribe. Because sometimes the cleanest revenge isn't personal, it's structural. The lights were too bright, the table was too clean. There was no coffee, no water, just a slim folder placed exactly where I'd be expected to sit. I knew what this was before anyone spoke. Deirdre from HR sat across from me. Her posture was perfect, her expression neutral. To her left was Clive Densmore, my new manager. We'd spoken maybe a dozen times since his promotion. Clive folded his hands on the table. Julian, we've completed an internal review of your client performance metrics. A beat passed. He didn't wait for my response. There are discrepancies. The data you submitted. It doesn't match what's in the system. He nodded toward Deirdre. She slid the folder toward me. We believe your reports were altered. Intentionally. Inside the folder was a termination letter, pre-signed. 2 weeks of severance if I walked away quietly. I didn't touch it. I looked at the pen sitting beside it, uncapped, ready. Clive leaned forward. We know this is difficult, but the audit was thorough. I stayed quiet. We'd prefer not to escalate this further, Deirdre added. Sign the agreement, and we'll ensure a smooth transition. I stared at the paper. The black ink seemed to vibrate slightly. Could have been the fluorescent lights. Could have been my pulse. 6 years. 6 years of building custom metrics for global clients. Of digging through broken data pipelines at 2 a.m. Of watching underqualified managers get credit for the systems I held together with code and caffeine. Now this, I wasn't angry. Not yet. Mostly I was disappointed. Not in them, but in myself for thinking I wouldn't need a backup plan. I finally spoke. Before I sign anything, I said, reaching slowly into my jacket pocket. I think you should see this. I placed my phone on the table and unlocked it. Clive blinked. Deirdre didn't move. I tapped open a folder in my email app. Every day since I started, I've blind copied my client reports to a private archive. Nothing confidential, just submission timestamps, raw numbers. A habit I picked up early. Deirdre frowned. Sending company data to a personal account is a clear violation. Section 4.3 of the security policy I finished for her, which allows for personal performance logs maintained for review purposes. I cleared it with legal in 2019. I have the email. I pulled it up, showed her the header, the timestamp. Deirdre didn't reply. I kept going. I noticed something strange a few months ago. The numbers I submitted were solid, but my quarterly metrics didn't reflect them. I opened a spreadsheet. Simple, clean. This column shows my original reports. This one shows what ended up in the system. Over 8 months, my acquisition totals were consistently lowered. Not randomly, exactly 14.3%. Deirdre looked over at Clive. I continued. That wouldn't be possible unless someone with admin access made the changes. And every one of those edits, every single one was made under your credentials, Clive. Tuesdays and Thursdays, 7th, 15 to 7:45 p.m. The same time you told the team you were doing system maintenance. Clive's jaw clenched. Still, he said nothing. I zoomed in on the data. The pattern's clear, my numbers drop. Adam Tierney's numbers magically go up. Same clients, same territory, same dates, different names on the success logs. That name changed something. Adam was promoted 2 months ago. Less experience, less client retention. But he had board connections, and apparently a helpful hand reshaping the stats. I'm not the only one, I said. I spoke to 3 other team members, all women. all showing the same pattern. Their KPIs drop after Clive took over. No such issue with their male peers. No one spoke. The room was still too still. I'm not here to argue. I brought proof. And while you were preparing this termination letter, I was emailing this packet to our ethics officer, legal, and a third-party compliance contact. It's already delivered. Clive's voice finally cracked. Julian, this is a serious allegation. It's not an allegation, I said. It's a data trail. And I'm just following it. Deirdre shifted in her chair. I could hear her tapping under the table, probably texting. I stood, slowly, calmly. You wanted a clean exit. But I'm not signing anything. Because I didn't come here to be fired. I looked Clive in the eye. I came here to see how far you'd go. If this part got your attention, hit that subscribe button. The next part, it's where the real game begins. Because I didn't just expose one person, I built a system they couldn't touch. I didn't start keeping a second copy because I was paranoid. I started because of my father. He was a public sector IT contractor. Worked with state infrastructure systems databases for everything from building permits to pension records. Not glamorous work, but precise, quiet, stable. Until it wasn't. I was 17 when it happened. Some senior executive accused him of failing to deliver a report, claimed he'd lost critical project data. But my dad knew he hadn't. He followed protocol. He logged everything. The problem was he couldn't prove it. The system had changed. Backups were rotated, logs overwritten. What little remained was dismissed as inconclusive. He was let go, quietly. No real investigation, no appeal. No one said it directly, but the implication was clear. It was easier to lose one contractor than confront the mess inside the system. That moment never left me. Not just the injustice, but the silence that followed. How quickly people move on when it's not their name being erased. I think that's when I understood something. Systems don't care. They don't protect truth. They protect whoever has access. So when I started working in data systems myself, I built differently. My first job was at a logistics firm outside Denver. Nothing fancy, just warehouse optimization and fleet route planning. But I noticed early that the data didn't always match what we saw on the ground. Delays were downplayed. Product loss estimates adjusted. Certain managers always came out looking spotless, while others quietly vanished. It wasn't personal, it was structural. I started keeping notes. Simple things at first: timestamps, report IDs, copies of key exports. Not for whistleblowing, just insurance. A habit. It followed me through every job after, including the one I'd just been fired from. When I joined the consulting firm in Chicago, I was 30. I wasn't new to the game, but I still believed in proving myself. Put your head down. Deliver clean work. Let the results speak. And for a while they did. I built a name for myself. Handled the messy migrations. Rebuilt outdated analytics stacks for major clients. Never missed a deadline. By year 3, I was running point on multi-million-dollar system deployments. Trusted, respected. Until Clive came in. Clive Densmore arrived quietly. Mid-40s, MBA type. Not technical, but fluent in the right buzzwords. Data alignment. Operational continuity. Proactive metrics optimization. I knew the type. They come in after the hard part's done. Take credit for stabilizing what others built. Still, I didn't think much of it. Until the review cycles changed. My quarterly metrics started slipping. Subtle, but steady. Instead of hitting 110% of goal, I was clocking in at 92, despite onboarding more clients than ever before. I triple-checked everything, cross-referenced my daily exports, compared what I submitted to what showed up in the dashboards. They didn't match. At first, I thought it was a glitch. Maybe an ETL job failed. Maybe a bad join on the reporting layer. I opened a ticket with internal IT. They said they'd look into it. Nothing changed. I went back to my logs, started overlaying my submissions with the system records. Day by day, week by week. That's when I saw the pattern. My totals were being trimmed. Precisely 14.3% on average. Not just once, but across dozens of records. And right around the same time, Adam Tierney's numbers, the guy who used to shadow my client calls, started rising. He got the promotion I was quietly told I wasn't ready for, despite the fact that I'd trained him. I didn't say anything at the time. There's a certain dignity in letting others talk while you observe. But I documented everything. I set up a mirrored version of our weekly performance dashboard. Not public, just for me. It pulled from the same raw exports I submitted. Then I started tracking deltas between what I sent and what showed up. When I had enough, I wrote a script to log any unauthorized transformations. Timestamps, credentials, device IDs. I didn't broadcast it, didn't threaten anyone. Just watched and waited. That's the part people don't understand. Revenge isn't about rage. It's about rhythm. You wait until the moment they think you've lost. Then you show them what you never forgot. So when Clive sat across from me with that termination letter, when he looked me in the eye and said my numbers didn't add up, I didn't panic. Because I already had the receipts. The only thing I didn't know yet was how deep the rot went, and whether I was willing to do more than just clear my name. That question stayed with me as I walked out of that room past the other employees pretending not to make eye contact. Some knew, most didn't, but all of them had seen someone disappear before. They just didn't know I wasn't done. Not yet. The thing about data manipulation is, it's rarely random. It takes time, intent. Someone has to benefit. In this case, it was Adam Tierney. On paper, Adam was sharp, polite, curious, good with clients. He came from a smaller consultancy somewhere out east. Had a tidy resume and a clean LinkedIn photo, smiling sleeves, rolled top button undone just enough to seem approachable. He joined our team about a year after I did. Bright. A bit overeager. Didn't know how to run an end-to-end migration, but he asked the right questions. I didn't mind him at first. I even trained him on a few client accounts. Taught him how to navigate the quirks of our internal dashboards, the undocumented rules behind our success metrics. He took notes, lots of them, and he listened. Too well. I started noticing it during all-hands meetings. Little things. A project I led would get mentioned, but Adam's name would show up in the client commendation. A metric I built would be quoted in a performance review without attribution. I didn't call it out. You don't in places like that. It's seen as petty. Besides, I believed the work would speak for itself. But then he started getting invited to meetings I wasn't included in. Meetings with senior leadership. Meetings I used to attend. And when the promotion cycle rolled around, Adam was named engagement lead, just under Clive. I wasn't even in the running. That was when I started looking closer, not just at my numbers, but his. I pulled the same kind of daily snapshots for Adam's client portfolio. Cross-referenced the submission times, the update logs, the system calculations. His success rate had jumped 17% over 3 months. But the client base hadn't changed. The volume hadn't changed. Only the attribution had. He was getting credit for accounts that were originally assigned to me. Even some I'd closed myself. How? Because once the data was in the system, the metadata could be rewritten. The source record could still say Julian, but the roll-up reports, the ones the executives saw, could say Adam. That wasn't a bug. It was designed that way. For flexibility, they said. For visibility. For executive summaries. It also meant anyone with the right credentials could rewrite history. Quietly. I traced the changes back through the admin logs. And there it was. Same window every week, Tuesday and Thursday evenings. Clive's account. Same device ID. Same IP address. And every change followed the same pattern. My numbers down. Adam's up. It was surgical. And it wasn't just me. I spoke quietly with 3 colleagues I trusted. All women. All had worked under Clive for at least 1 review cycle. Each of them had stories. Missed targets they didn't understand. Reviews that cited underperformance without explanation. One of them, Maya, had even filed an informal complaint, but was told she misunderstood how the data was aggregated. She didn't misunderstand. She just didn't have proof. None of us did, not until now. I could have gone to HR, but Deirdre was already part of the room that tried to cut me out. I could have sent a direct message to the ethics hotline, but that would have taken weeks, maybe months. And I didn't want this dragged through committee. I wanted the truth laid out clearly, with no room for spin. So I kept pulling. 8 months worth of logs. Every changed cell. Every user credential. A timeline of edits matched against system access. I built a full map. Then I overlaid it with promotion decisions, bonuses, and KPI scores. The result was hard to argue. There was a clear correlation between underreported metrics and passed over promotions. And in every instance, the beneficiaries were male. The ones being pushed down female employees, or me. I still remember the night I finished compiling it. It was a Sunday. I sat in my apartment, lights, low monitors glowing. Outside, the city was quiet. Inside, I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time. Certainty. Not just in the data, but in what it meant. They'd built a system that rewarded silence. That punished people who didn't play the game. And they assumed no one would look closely. No one would check the math. But I had, and now I had to decide what to do with it. Because it's one thing to collect evidence. It's another to light the fuse. I didn't sleep much that night. I wasn't nervous. I wasn't afraid. I just knew that once I sent the files, there was no going back. No unseeing it. No pretending I could keep working under Clive, smiling through status updates while the machine kept running. I thought of my father again. Of how easily they had erased him, and how easily they'd almost done the same to me. That's when I realized something. The system didn't just need to be exposed. It needed to be rebuilt. But first I had to force it into the light. Most people think systems are neutral. They're not. They reflect the people who build them. What they care about. What they choose to ignore. And I knew this one better than anyone else, because I built it. When I joined the company 6 years ago, we didn't have a centralized reporting architecture. Every client had their own structure, fragmented spreadsheets, disconnected data feeds, inconsistent tags. It was chaos. So I started pulling everything into a unified model. Slowly. Carefully. Built a performance framework that could adapt to different clients, but still roll up to leadership. It wasn't glamorous work. No one gave a speech or handed out awards. But after a while, the dashboard started showing up in meetings, then quarterly reviews, eventually executive summaries. People started trusting the numbers. What they didn't realize was the numbers could still be changed. Not the source data that was usually secure, but the middle layer, the transformations, the friendly names and filters that made reports digestible for leadership. That's where the manipulation happened. And Clive knew that. I never gave him admin rights directly. But once he was promoted, IT granted him elevated access by default. As a department head, he could impersonate lower-tier roles for testing purposes. A useful feature, also dangerous. I'd flagged it once in a team meeting, said it needed stronger audit controls. It got tabled, no follow-up. So when I started seeing discrepancies, I wasn't surprised that the edits didn't leave fingerprints in the front-end dashboard. But they did in the logs. Because I wrote the log pipeline myself. We didn't use standard logging tools. To save cost, we had built a lightweight internal tracker. It wasn't flashy, but I'd configured it to store user credentials, device IDs, session times, and SQL actions for every write-back to the reporting layer. No one paid much attention to it. It wasn't in the main dashboard. No alerts, no pop-ups. Just a quiet trail of truth. So I followed it. I traced every edit that impacted my metrics, one by one. Each one matched the same pattern: modified field, adjusted downward, saved under Clive's credentials, timestamped between 7:15 and 7:45 p.m. Always on Tuesdays and Thursdays. Always from the same device. Always from our office IP. He'd told the team he stayed late to monitor system health. What he didn't say was that he used those hours to rewrite outcomes. At first it was small. Shave a few points here. Shift attribution there. But over time it added up. To missed targets, lower bonuses. Just enough underperformance to justify skipping me for promotion. Just enough to boost Adam's profile. Once I mapped the patterns, I cross-referenced them with performance reviews. Not just mine. I looked at Maya's, Aaron's, and Tasha's, the 3 colleagues who had spoken to me privately. Same thing. Dips that didn't align with real outcomes. Client feedback disconnected from KPI scores. performance flags that came out of nowhere. All within Clive's org, all within the same review cycles. I packaged the entire dataset, time-stamped exports, side-by-side comparisons, credential logs, visual overlays of the trends. And I added one more piece. I compiled the financial implications, the bonuses I should have received, the raises that were tied to performance tiers I'd technically achieved but didn't get credit for. The lost compensation totaled over $28,000. Multiply that by 4 employees, and it wasn't just a pattern. It was systemic suppression. The next morning, I walked into the office and requested a meeting. Deirdre from HR booked a room. Clive joined 5 minutes later. He didn't look surprised to see me. He looked prepared, like he knew I might push back but didn't think I'd come with anything solid. That's when he handed me the folder. The one with the termination letter. The quiet exit. 2 weeks' pay and no questions asked. They thought I'd panic. Instead, I pulled out my phone, opened the folder labeled Internal Data Issues, tiled my screen toward them. I've been blind copying my client reports to an off-network archive since my first year here, I said. Nothing confidential, just structure and timestamps. Clive blinked once. Deirdre's expression didn't change. These are the logs from our internal tracker. They show edits to my records made under your credentials. Same time, same day, every week. Clive leaned back. Julian, you're making this more complicated than it needs to be. I didn't respond. I opened the spreadsheet. This is the delta between my submitted metrics and the altered values. Consistently reduced by 14.3% over 8 months. And here's the financial impact what that suppression cost me in lost bonuses. I let the numbers speak. Then I added one last file. This is a breakdown of similar patterns in 3 other employee records. Same review cycles. Same access points. None of them knew what was happening. Deirdre finally looked uneasy. Her hands were still, but her eyes darted between the screens. You're accusing a senior manager of falsifying performance data, she said quietly. No, I replied. I'm showing you evidence that he did. What you do with it is up to you. Clive tried to respond, but I cut him off. By the way, this entire packet was sent to Legal and Ethics 20 minutes ago. I'm not here to negotiate. I'm here to observe what happens next. That meeting didn't end with an apology. No one offered to fix anything. Not yet. But I saw the shift. In Deirdre's silence. In Clive's clenched jaw. In the way they didn't ask for the documents back. That was enough for now. Because I hadn't just brought evidence. I'd brought a mirror. And made them look. It took 36 hours. That's how long it was between the moment I walked out of that conference room and the call that changed everything. For a day and a half, nothing happened. No HR follow-up, no calendar invites, no internal emails, just silence. It didn't surprise me. Corporate silence isn't passive. It's tactical. Sometimes it's how they buy time. Sometimes it's how they test your patience. To see if you'll flinch, fold, withdraw your claims. I didn't. I showed up to work like nothing had happened. Sat at my desk, answered emails, ran audit queries no one asked for, and waited. The call came early, 7:42 a.m. Unknown number. Internal extension. I picked up. Mr. Reyes, a voice said. This is Melissa from the executive office. Lorraine Templeton would like to meet with you this morning. Lorraine Templeton, the CEO. We'd never spoken directly. I'd seen her once years ago at a company-wide town hall. She wasn't the type to make speeches. She let the numbers speak. Kept her office on the top floor, glass walls, soft carpet, no photos. I said yes, of course. Melissa didn't ask if I was free. She just told me the time. The elevator ride up felt longer than usual. I'd only been to the executive floor once for a client presentation. Everything up there looked quieter, more deliberate. Even the air smelled different, filtered, expensive. Melissa met me at the door and walked me in. No small talk. Just a brief nod and a door held open. Lorraine stood as I entered. No suit jacket, no rehearsed smile, just a calm, sharp-eyed look. She gestured to the chair across from her. No assistants, no lawyers, just us. Julian, she said, I spent most of yesterday reviewing the documentation you submitted. She didn't waste time. I didn't either. I nodded, waited. It's compelling, she added. Not just because of the volume, but because of how methodical it is. She wasn't flattering me. It felt more like she was establishing terms, level ground, what you exposed. It's not just about one manager manipulating data. It's about how easy it was to do, how no one noticed. Or maybe they did and looked away. I said nothing. She looked down for a moment, then back at me. I built this company to be better than that. To reward performance, not politics. I believed her. At least I believe she meant it. But meaning something and enforcing it aren't the same. With respect, I said quietly, a value system that isn't enforced is just marketing. She let that sit. Then she smiled just slightly, not defensive, not offended, more like acknowledgement. That's why I called you up here, she said. Clive Densmore has been placed on administrative leave, effective immediately. I didn't react, just listened. HR is conducting a formal investigation. Legal has been looped in. I've also asked our internal audit team to review performance data going back 3 fiscal quarters. It was the right move, a necessary one. But it wasn't what I was waiting to hear. She seemed to sense that. I didn't bring you here just to inform you, she said. I want you involved in fixing this. I looked at her. Not suspicious, just cautious. What does that mean? We need someone who understands the system's architecture. Someone who knows where the vulnerabilities are. And someone who's proven they won't look the other way. She paused. I want you to work directly with audit and compliance. Not as a technician, but as a stakeholder. Help us redesign this process. Make sure it can't happen again. It caught me off guard. Not the opportunity, but the intent behind it. Most companies in this situation would offer a payout, a quiet exit, a thank you with a non-disclosure clause. Lorraine was offering access, responsibility. I didn't answer right away. She opened a folder on her desk and slid it toward me. Inside was a draft proposal, reinstatement, restored bonus compensation, a new role, Director of Performance Integrity. Not flashy, but real. A seat with weight. There was also a note handwritten in clean black ink. If we're going to change the culture, it starts with who we trust to lead it. I closed the folder. What about Adam Tierney, I asked. His name wasn't on the logs, but he benefited from every adjustment. Lorraine's face shifted slightly, more guarded. His promotion is under review. We're handling it. I nodded. It was an answer without being an answer, but I let it go for now. Before I stood to leave, she said one last thing. I know what it costs to speak up. I know people won't thank you. Some will resent you. She held my gaze. That doesn't mean you stop. I didn't promise anything that day. Didn't say yes. Didn't sign. I just told her I'd think about it. Because what she was asking wasn't just a job. It was a fight. And before I stepped into it, I had to decide if I was done surviving or ready to start changing the rules. I didn't give Lorraine an answer right away. I took 2 days, stayed quiet, went back to work like nothing had changed, reviewed dashboards, cleaned up code I no longer trusted, watched who looked me in the eye and who didn't. And I thought, not about revenge. That part was over. What came next had to be something else. Not just a reaction, a rebuild. When I finally walked into her office again, I kept it simple. If we're doing this, I said, we're not just patching policies. We're building a system that can't be gamed. Lorraine nodded once. That was all it took. The next day, I was moved upstairs. New title, new desk, no welcome email. Which was fine. This wasn't a celebration. It was an operation. I spent the first week auditing our architecture, not just the reporting layer. I dug deeper into the access protocol's session tracking role hierarchies. And what I found didn't surprise me. There were too many holes. Permissions inherited from outdated roles. Legacy accounts with admin rights no one tracked. Log files stored but never reviewed. Audit trails, if they existed at all, were fragmented across systems. It wasn't sabotage, it was entropy. Years of shortcuts and workarounds. People building what worked fast, not what worked right. And that's what Clive had used. He didn't hack the system. He was the system. The kind of leader who knew just enough to manipulate it and assumed no one below him would ever question the outcome. Until someone did. The proposal I wrote wasn't flashy. No blockchain, no third-party vendor promises. just something that worked. Immutable versioning. Every report submitted by an employee would be stored as is with a cryptographic hash that flagged if even a single value changed later. Transparent access logs. Not just stored, but visible to the user. If someone touched your data, you'd see it. Who, when, what changed. Change notifications. Quiet alerts sent to employees when their performance records were altered. No drama, just facts. Quarterly integrity reviews. A small team, not HR, not management, reviewing logs for irregularities. Looking for patterns, not people. Open query console. Employees could compare their own submissions against final dashboards. No coding needed. Simple, practical, uncomfortable for anyone used to hiding behind the system. When I presented it to the internal audit team, there was silence at first. Then came the pushback. Do we really want to open this much visibility? Isn't this going to cause paranoia? What if employees start accusing managers every time something looks off? I didn't argue. I just pointed at the numbers. Lost bonuses, misreported KPIs, an 8-month pattern of manipulation affecting at least 4 careers. Then I said one thing. If a system falls apart when you shine a light on it, maybe it wasn't built right in the first place. That quieted the room. We started implementation the next day. The rollout wasn't smooth. There were tech issues, old records that didn't port cleanly, pushback from mid-level managers who like things the way they were. Some said it was overkill. Some said I was making enemies. They weren't wrong, but I wasn't trying to make friends. I was trying to make sure no one else had to do what I did, collect evidence just to survive. By the end of the first month, early data started coming in. Employees were using the query console. Review flags were being triggered automatically, and in 2 separate cases, discrepancies were caught and corrected before they became performance issues. No scandals, no breakdowns, just accountability. Quiet, steady, exactly how I wanted it. A week later, I got a short email from Maya, one of the analysts Clive had undercut. Just wanted you to know my numbers match this quarter, for the first time in a year. It didn't say much, but it didn't have to. I still don't know how long this structure will last. Systems change, people adapt, new problems will surface. Someone somewhere will always try to bend the rules. But now they'll have to do it out in the open. Now the system pushes back. If you've made it this far, and you've ever wondered whether it's worth documenting, questioning, or standing your ground, it is. Sometimes you don't win by tearing things down. You win by building something better in its place. If this story resonates or you've lived something like it, hit the subscribe button. There's more ahead. It happened the night before the Jenkins pitch. We'd spent weeks preparing. The Jenkins account wasn't just big, it was high profile. A legacy client known for meticulous selection and long-term contracts. Winning them would mean real credibility for the new system, not just internally, but across the industry. It was our first major bid since the performance integrity rollout. I wasn't presenting alone, but I was anchoring the technical segment, and everything hinged on how well I could explain the value we'd built. So I double-checked every slide, every number. Even ran the visuals past Maya, who had a better eye than I did. By 10 p.m., I shut my laptop and went to sleep feeling something close to calm. The next morning, that feeling vanished. I walked into the office early, 7:15 a.m. The meeting was at 9. I opened the deck in my machine to review it one last time. Something felt off. Slide 4 wrong figures. The client summary had changed. Projections were skewed. The compliance segment was gone completely. For a second, I thought maybe I'd opened the wrong file, checked the path. It was the same folder, same name, same timestamp. I opened the version history. It had been accessed the night before. 11:42 p.m. Someone had gone in and edited it after I'd closed for the night. And whoever it was didn't just tweak formatting. They altered key numbers, removed validations, even replaced specific client references with generic filler. It looked like a sloppy mistake. But it wasn't. This wasn't accidental. It was sabotage. I pulled up the system logs. Thanks to the infrastructure I'd implemented, we now had full tracking on who accessed what, when, and from where. It took less than a minute to find it. Nathan Cole, senior analyst. On the surface, just another quiet back-end guy. Rarely spoke in meetings. Rarely took sides. But he was close to Adam. Used to sit beside him before Adam's promotion. He also hadn't hidden his feelings about the transparency changes. More than once I'd heard him joke about surveillance software. He called my reporting console the snitch system. And now he'd used his access-limited but still privileged to make precise time changes to a live presentation file the night before our biggest pitch of the quarter. It wasn't hard to guess the intent. Undermine the rollout. Embarrass me in front of leadership. Maybe even spook Jenkins into walking away. I sat there looking at the log entry and let the silence settle around me. Then I called IT security. By 8:00 a.m., I was in a meeting room with Rita from IT and Arthur from legal. I laid out the timeline, showed the version history, the edits, the access logs. They didn't ask many questions. They didn't need to. It was all there, time-stamped, credentialed, clear as day. Arthur looked up from the printout he'd been reviewing. We'll need to speak with him immediately. Rita nodded. Do you want to be in the room? No, I said. Just tell me when he's gone. Nathan was escorted out just after 9:30. Security walked him through the lobby without handcuffs, but with enough presence that people noticed. He didn't say anything as he passed my desk. Didn't look in my direction. But I could feel it. That tight silence that wraps around someone when they've been caught but haven't accepted it yet. Half shame, half defiance. It doesn't matter. He was gone. That still left the bigger problem. The presentation. We had less than an hour before Jenkins logged into the call. The client team had already been briefed. This was our only window, so I did what I always do. I rebuilt. Maya jumped in to help with visuals. Tasha from compliance reviewed the sections that had been deleted. We pulled data from backups, reconfirmed projections, wrote clean transitions. By the time the clock hit 9:59, we had something close to whole. Not perfect, but solid. The pitch went better than I expected. There were no fireworks, no applause. But the Jenkins team asked the right questions, listened, took notes. At the end of the call, their lead manager said, "You've clearly built something thoughtful. That matters to us." And then they signed. 3-year contract, full suite integration. Largest performance-related deal we'd landed all year. The system held, barely. That night I stayed late at my desk, not because I had to, just to sit in the quiet. I thought about how close it had come to falling apart. How one person, one insecure, bitter person, could have unraveled months of work in a matter of minutes. And how without the system I'd put in place no one would have believed me. It wouldn't have looked like sabotage. It would have looked like a mistake, my mistake. That was the part that stuck with me. It wasn't just that Nathan tried to ruin the pitch. It was how easy it would have been for him to succeed. The Jenkins contract should have been a win. And it was on paper. We landed the deal, got the signatures, moved forward with integration. But inside the building, something shifted. Not in the data, not in the numbers. In the atmosphere. At first, it was just quiet. Not the silence of focus. The other kind. The kind that settles in meetings after someone says my name. The kind that turns heads in the hallway a half-second too late. People started watching me differently. Some with curiosity, some with caution. A few with something colder like calculation. And the congratulations when they came felt thin, polite, measured. Like people weren't sure which version of me they were supposed to be talking to now. By the end of that week, I'd heard the nickname, the Watchdog. It was passed around in Slack threads, whispered in shared kitchens, used in conversations I wasn't meant to hear. At first, it sounded harmless, even flattering in a strange way, but the tone mattered. It wasn't admiration, it was fear, suspicion, as if the system I'd built wasn't a tool but a trap. I heard someone say it flat out one afternoon in the stairwell. Ever since Julian got promoted, it's like everything's under surveillance. The voice was low tight. I didn't recognize it. Didn't need to. It wasn't about who said it. It was about the fact that people were saying it at all. To them, I wasn't just another data architect anymore. I was someone who changed the rules. And people who benefit from the old rules don't forget who rewrote them. Nathan's termination didn't help. It should have sent a message about accountability, about consequences. Instead, it hardened lines, made some people defensive, made others strategic. There were meetings I stopped being invited to. Slack channels that suddenly went quiet when I joined. Decisions made 2 layers above me, then handed down like final terms. No one said anything directly. No one had to. The message was clear. I wasn't one of them anymore. I was something else. A reminder. Still, I didn't push back. I showed up, did my job, led the system reviews, published transparency reports like clockwork, and quietly I tracked the patterns, because that's what I do. And what I saw was complicated. Some departments were thriving, team morale up, retention stable, performance accuracy higher than ever. Other areas were struggling. Not because the system was broken, but because people could no longer hide behind vague metrics. Visibility changed the game, and not everyone wanted to be seen. One morning I walked into the kitchen to refill my coffee. A few analysts stood near the fridge talking in low voices. When I walked in, the conversation died. I didn't say anything, didn't ask, just poured my coffee and turned to leave. But one of them, Noah from the trading desk, spoke up. "You think you're making things better," he said quietly. "But some of us were doing just fine before all this." I turned, looked at him. He didn't sound angry. He sounded tired. "No one's stopping you from doing your job," I said. "No," he replied. "But you've changed how we're measured, how we're seen." He took a breath, held my gaze. "You've made enemies, Julian. More than you know." Then he left. I stood there for a long moment, staring at the black surface of my coffee. Not because I was shaken, because I realized he wasn't wrong. Reform sounds clean when you say it out loud, like a straight path forward. But in practice, it's friction. Every change creates resistance. Every safeguard disrupts someone's shortcut. And the people who lose those shortcuts, they remember. Later that week, Lorraine called me into her office. No agenda, no PowerPoint, just a conversation. She asked how things were going. I gave her the numbers. Upticks in performance clarity, fewer data disputes, improved manager feedback cycles. She nodded, listened, then leaned back in her chair. "Are you okay?" she asked. It caught me off guard. Not the question, the fact that she meant it. I paused. "I'm not looking to be liked," I said. But I didn't expect to be seen as a threat. She nodded again. Change makes people nervous. It forces them to examine what they've been getting away with. We sat in silence for a moment. Then she said something I still think about. "You've built something important, but now you have to survive it." That night I walked home in the cold. Didn't check email, didn't review dashboards, just walked. And I thought about the line between accountability and alienation. About what happens when the system finally starts doing what it's supposed to, and the people in it realize they can't hide anymore. I didn't regret what I'd built, but I was beginning to understand the cost. Not in data, in people. It didn't happen all at once. There was no grand announcement, no viral internal memo, no company-wide applause. Real change doesn't usually come like that. It starts quiet, almost invisible. The first sign came from Maya. She stopped by my office one afternoon with a simple update. "Just wanted to say thanks," she said. "My Q1 bonus was accurate this time. First time in 2 years." She didn't linger, didn't overshare. Just smiled once, then walked out. But I sat with that moment for a while, because I remembered when she came to me months earlier. Confused, frustrated. No one believed her numbers were being distorted. Now she didn't need anyone to believe her. She had proof. The system spoke for itself. A week later, I got an email from a junior analyst in a different department. Someone I barely knew. Short message, no small talk. I checked my data history through the new console. Found a calculation that was off. Flagged it. Manager corrected it the next day. Didn't think that was possible here. Just, thanks. That was it. And that was enough. Across the company, small things started shifting. Managers became more cautious about editing performance summaries. Review meetings included dashboards with time-locked source files. HR began incorporating log snapshots into promotion panels. No drama, no headlines, just quiet pressure. The kind that changes behavior without anyone having to admit they'd been doing it wrong before. One morning I walked by a whiteboard in the strategy pod. Someone had scribbled a line near the corner. "If it's not logged, it didn't happen." It was half a joke, but only half. I started tracking adoption metrics more closely. Query volume was up. Employees were checking their records more often, flagging inconsistencies early. Participation in quarterly audits nearly doubled. Not because they were scared, but because they knew they had a say, and they used it. The biggest shift came from outside. Jenkins sent over a follow-up request after onboarding. They asked for a detailed breakdown of how our performance integrity model worked, specifically how we handled attribution rollback and audit trails. They weren't just interested, they wanted to replicate it. That caught Lorraine's attention, and it changed the tone in the executive meetings. Suddenly, this wasn't just internal cleanup. It was marketable, a differentiator. What used to be uncomfortable became forward-thinking. What had been inconvenient became a new standard. Funny how quickly principles catch on when clients start asking about them. A few weeks later, during a routine department check-in, something unexpected happened. Tasha, compliance lead not known for being soft, paused the meeting and said this: "The new system isn't perfect, but for the first time I feel like I'm not fighting upstream." Then she looked at me. No smile, just a nod. That stayed with me. Even Lorraine changed. She started sitting in on integrity review sessions. Not leading, just listening, asking real questions, taking notes. One afternoon she stopped by my desk. No meeting, no warning. "Do you think this will hold?" she asked. I looked at her. "It's holding so far, but that's not the hard part. What is making it part of the culture, so it's not tied to me or to a headline, so it keeps working even when no one's watching?" She didn't answer right away. Then she said, "Then that's where we focus next." I won't pretend things got easy. Some teams resisted. Some people still found ways to drag their feet. A few left quietly, no reason given. But the trend line was clear. Retention among women and minority staff improved. Disputes around bonus decisions dropped. Anonymous reports to the ethics line fell by almost half. The numbers were moving, and for once in the right direction. One evening, I stayed late to clean up documentation. The building was mostly empty. Just the low hum of the server room and the click of keys. As I was packing up, Tanya, another team lead, stopped by. She looked tired, but her voice was steady. "We landed 2 new clients this month. Both said they chose us because of our transparency model." I raised an eyebrow. She smiled a little, words getting around. Then she paused. "You know, for a while I thought none of this would make a difference. And now, I think we've got something real. And I think you made that possible." She left before I could say much, just nodded and walked out. After she was gone, I sat back down, looked at the monitor, pulled up the audit dashboard, watched the log updates scroll in. Each entry just a timestamp, a username, a field adjusted, a reason given. No names that stood out, no big scandals, just the system, working. It didn't feel like victory. It felt like progress. And for the first time in a long while, that was enough. The envelope came by courier. Heavy paper. No return address. My name printed in bold legal font. I knew what it was before I opened it. Clive Densmore had filed a lawsuit, not just against the company, against me personally. Wrongful dismissal, defamation, intentional interference with professional standing. He wanted damages. He wanted headlines. He wanted revenge. I read through it slowly. Every paragraph carefully worded. Every claim just plausible enough to be dangerous. He painted himself as the victim. Said I'd fabricated evidence, manipulated logs, orchestrated a vindictive campaign to remove him. His lawyers used phrases like ambitious vendetta and self-serving whistleblower. Reading it didn't make me angry. It made me tired. I'd spent months proving that data could speak for itself, that systems could protect people instead of burying them. And now I was being accused of twisting that system for personal gain. I forwarded the documents to Arthur in legal. He called within the hour. "We saw this coming," he said. "But it's still serious. He's got lawyers who know how to posture." "Do we have enough to fight it?" "We do," he said. "The system logs are intact, immutable, time-stamped, multiple witnesses, independent audits. But it'll be a process." I understood. It wasn't about truth. It was about pressure. The next 3 months were filled with depositions. I sat in rooms with neutral carpeting and polite court reporters answering the same questions in slightly different forms. They asked why I started archiving my reports, why I built the audit system, why I chose to send the data to legal when I did. They implied I had something to prove, that I'd exaggerated what Clive did, that I had a grudge. I didn't flinch, but by the third session I stopped trying to explain. I just showed them the logs, the dates, the access points, the edits. They didn't argue with the data, they just shifted the narrative. So you admit you kept a personal archive of company performance data. I kept a copy of my own submissions. That's not unusual, especially when I noticed discrepancies. But that's not standard protocol, is it? Neither is altering performance metrics after midnight. They moved on. Clive was present for one of the sessions. He didn't speak, just sat behind his lawyer taking notes. I looked at him once briefly. His face was unreadable, but I could see it in his posture. He wasn't there to win. He was there to fight, to drag this out, to drain time and energy, to make me regret pulling the thread in the first place. But regret never came, because I knew why I did it. At the end of one long deposition, they asked me a question I didn't expect. Mr. Reyes, why did you feel the need to build such an extensive tracking system? I didn't look at my notes. Because I've seen what happens when people lose their jobs without proof. Because my father lost his entire career when someone else manipulated his records and no one believed him. I paused. I built the system I wish he'd had. For once, they didn't respond immediately. The room stayed quiet, and for the first time I saw something flicker across Clive's face. Recognition. Maybe not of guilt, but of inevitability. 2 weeks later, Clive withdrew the lawsuit. No settlement, no retraction, just a formal dismissal with prejudice. The company released a brief internal statement, said the matter had been resolved. No further comment. No one talked about it openly, but word got around. People stopped calling me the watchdog. They started calling me by name again. I didn't take it as a sign of acceptance, just understanding. They finally knew where I stood and what I was willing to stand through. Lorraine invited me to her office the following week. She didn't bring up the lawsuit, didn't ask how I felt about it. Instead, she handed me a printed report. It was the latest performance audit, 6 months into the new system. Promotions had increased across underrepresented groups. Bonus disputes were down. Attrition had dropped by nearly 20%. You didn't just protect yourself, she said. You helped reshape how we operate. I didn't say much. I didn't need to. The numbers were enough. That night, I walked home in the rain. Didn't check my phone. Didn't open my laptop. Just listened to the sound of the city. And I thought about how long it takes for truth to settle. How many walls it has to push through. And how, when it finally gets through, it doesn't shout. It doesn't demand. It just stands, right where it belongs. A week after the lawsuit was dropped, I drove to visit my parents. It had been a while. Long enough that my mother had already planned dinner before I called. She always did that. Like she sensed when I was coming. They lived in a small town 2 hours outside the city. Quiet. Familiar. The kind of place where people still waved at neighbors they didn't like. My dad was on the porch when I pulled up, sitting in the same chair he always sat in when he had something on his mind. I parked, stepped out, and nodded. He nodded back. We didn't talk much at first. Just watched the sky shift from orange to gray. The cicadas were loud that evening, like they had something urgent to say. After a while, he said, I read about what happened. Not all of it, but enough. I waited. You built something. Something that holds people accountable. I nodded. He looked down at his hands, then back up at me. I'm proud of you, son. You did what I couldn't. He never talked much about what happened at his school. Just bits and pieces, like scraps of paper from a story he was still too angry to finish. He'd been a teacher for over 20 years. Math and science. The kind of teacher who stayed late for kids falling behind. One year he reported the principal for misusing school funds. Nothing dramatic, just wrong. A few months later, his performance evaluations dropped. Students were underperforming. Parent complaints mysteriously appeared in his file. He was put on leave, then let go. No warning, no hearing, just gone. He tried to fight it, filed an appeal, wrote letters, but he had no proof. Everything that mattered was locked behind closed doors. The system had protected itself, and he broke a little after that. We sat in silence for a bit longer. Then I said, "That's why I kept records. That's why I built the system. Because I remember what it did to you." He didn't respond, just gave a slow nod like something heavy inside him had shifted. Eventually he said, "You think it'll really make a difference not just now, long term?" I thought about that. "I don't know," I said. "But it gives people a way to push back, even if just a little." "That's more than I had," he said. Inside, my mom had already set the table. She pretended not to notice the quiet weight between us. She never pushed. We ate slowly, talked about the neighborhood, the garden, the price of gas, normal things. But after dinner, she pressed a small photo album into my hands. "Found this when I was cleaning out the garage," she said. "Figured it belonged to you now." I opened it later that night in my childhood room. Inside were pictures I hadn't seen in years, science fairs, track meets. My dad in the background of almost every one. He was always there, always watching, even when I didn't notice. One photo caught me. I was 10, holding a medal, grinning like I just discovered gravity. My dad stood beside me, hand on my shoulder, proud, but also tired. I never really saw that look when I was a kid, but I saw it now. The look of a man carrying a truth too heavy to share with his child. Back in the city, I returned to work. Things had changed since Clive's departure. There was less whispering, more cooperation. Some tension still lingered, sure, but it no longer dictated the mood. Lorraine gave me the green light to start phase 2 of our system. This time it wouldn't just monitor metrics. It would track who got credited for collaborative work, how often people were interrupted in meetings, how performance feedback skewed across departments, behavioral data, patterns of subtle bias, not just the obvious numbers. We called it the integrity layer. One afternoon, Imani stopped by my desk. She handed me a sealed envelope. "This came through ethics," she said. "Figured you should see it first." It was a letter, handwritten, from a woman at another firm. She'd heard about our reporting system, wanted advice on how to build one where she worked. Said her numbers had been changing. Said she felt like she was going crazy. She'd heard about me from a conference mention. Had tracked me down because, in her words, "You made it out. Maybe you know how I can." I sat with that letter for a long time. It reminded me of what Tanya once told me, about nearly giving up, about no one believing her. I wrote back that night, not because I had all the answers, but because sometimes all someone needs is one reply, one signal that they're not alone. A few weeks later, I went back to my parents' house. My dad met me at the porch again, but this time he was already standing, and he smiled when I got out of the car. "I saw your name in a magazine," he said, under a headline that said, "The Quiet Architect of Corporate Justice." He shook his head, a little amused. "Never thought I'd raise a headline maker." I smiled back. "Never thought I'd become one." He patted my shoulder a little firmer than usual. "You didn't just fix something for yourself. You built something I never had the chance to." We didn't say much else that night. We didn't need to. I didn't plan to leave. Not at first. I had poured years into this place, into the architecture, the dashboards, the quiet, invisible rails that helped people hold power accountable. But sometimes the moment chooses you. And mine came on a Monday. Late spring. The city already warming, buzzing with a new fiscal year. Lorraine called me into her office. She didn't look tired. She looked resolved. "We've had 3 firms approach us," she said. "They want our system. They want you." I sat quietly waiting. "One of them wants to hire you directly, to build what you built here over there, from the ground up." She didn't pressure me, didn't sell it, just offered the facts. I walked out of her office with the offer in my hand. It was generous. Executive title, blank check for infrastructure, full autonomy. But that wasn't what pulled me. What pulled me was the idea that this didn't have to be a one-time thing. That what I had built could be more than a defensive mechanism for a single company trying to save face. It could be a blueprint. That week I stayed late every night. Not because I had to, but because I wanted to make sure everything would hold. I cleaned up documentation, created onboarding pathways for the next system steward, left annotations in the audit logs, notes only someone like me would bother writing. And I watched the traffic. People were using it, checking their records, flagging issues, holding conversations around data that used to be kept in the dark. I didn't have to chase anyone anymore. The system was no longer mine, it was theirs. On my last Friday, Lorraine gathered a few people in the main conference room. No speeches, just coffee, small talk, a few handshakes that meant more than they let on. Maya hugged me. Noah nodded. Even Tasha gave me one of those short, sharp shoulder grips that said, "You did all right." Before I left, Lorraine pulled me aside. "We're going to keep it alive," she said. "What you built. Not just the code, the mindset." I believed her. The new firm was different. Faster, younger, more risk-tolerant. They gave me a team, blank servers, freedom to break things. And I did, in the best ways. I used everything I learned, from the mistakes, the fights, the depositions. This time I didn't just build a system to log data. I built one to learn. It flagged patterns without bias. It gave workers anonymous visibility into how decisions were made. It created audit trails that showed not just what happened, but what had been attempted and reversed. And when I rolled it out internally, people didn't fight it, because I started with the story. I told them what happened, what I had lived, what I had watched happen to others, what my father never got to undo. And I told them something simple. This is not a trap, it's a mirror, one you can finally trust. 6 months in usage was higher than anything we'd projected. Attrition dropped again. Promotion reviews got cleaner. People felt safer raising flags early because now they had proof. One employee wrote in a quarterly review, "I feel seen for the first time." And not because someone's watching, but because I know the numbers won't lie for someone else. That line stayed with me. I still think about the old place sometimes. I hear from Lorraine now and then. She sends reports, not just metrics, but stories. People using the system to defend themselves, to back up a colleague, to expose a pattern. Small victories, quiet wins, but those add up. And sometimes someone I've never met will reach out. An HR analyst, a compliance officer, even an intern. They'll say something like, "I read what you did. We're trying to do something similar here. Can I ask how you handled the pushback?" And I always write back. Because it matters. Because truth is fragile when it's alone. But when it travels quietly, steadily, it changes things. I didn't build something perfect. But I built something that can't be ignored. And that's enough. Not just for me, but for the people who come after. People like my dad. Like Maya. Like the intern afraid to speak up until the data speaks first. That's who I built it for. If this story meant something to you, if you've lived something like it, or know someone who has considered subscribing, we've got more stories to tell. And the system always remembers.